Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here today because we are jumping straight into the absolute pinnacle of smartphone technology. We're talking about the legendary year-after-year rivalry between the top-tier Apple and Samsung flagships. Every single year, these two tech giants push the boundaries of what can actually fit in our pockets, and 2025 is for sure no exception.
It's the big question on every tech enthusiast's mind right now. Which flagship actually reigns supreme? But look, rather than getting caught up in the usual fanboy brand loyalty debates, we are going to look strictly at the data. We've pulled together comprehensive testing results, from display metrics and thermal performance all the way to some brutal physical drop tests, just to give you a completely impartial, side-by-side breakdown.
Okay, let's dive right into our tale of the tape. We're looking at brightness, then gaming and battery, followed by camera priorities, and finally a brutal drop test comparing aluminum to titanium.
Round 1. The battle of brightness, visibility under the sun.
You know that incredibly frustrating feeling of stepping outside on a beautiful sunny day and suddenly being completely unable to read a single text message? Yeah, it's the worst. So let's see how these displays actually handle real-world sunlight. Now, a super quick physics lesson before we look at the stats. Display brightness is measured in something called nits. A nit is technically the brightness of a single candle spread across 1 square meter. Kind of wild, right? It's 2025, we have these insane microchips, but we are still measuring cutting-edge tech using candlelight. But for us, the rule of thumb is very simple. Higher nits equals much better outdoor visibility.
And wow, look at how these two stack up. The iPhone 17 series is hitting a massive, record-breaking 3,000 nits peak brightness. But Apple didn't just stop at raw power. They paired it with a brand new glare-free anti-reflective coating right on their Ceramic Shield 2 glass. On the flip side, Samsung's Galaxy S25 Ultra is sitting at a peak of 2,600 nits. Now don't get me wrong, both of these are astonishingly bright. But on paper, and especially out in direct sunlight, that specific combination of 3,000 nits plus the new coating gives the iPhone an undeniable edge for pure visibility.
Moving on to round 2. Gaming, heat, and battery, pushing these 3-nanometer chips to the limit.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing how these phenomenally advanced 3-nanometer processors actually handle sustained load. We're talking about the A19 Pro in the iPhone versus the Snapdragon 8 Elite in the Samsung. They were put through a brutal 1-hour continuous PUBG mobile gaming session running at a silky smooth 120 frames per second. Just look at the difference in power consumption here. After a full hour of intense gaming, the iPhone 17 Pro Max only dropped 18% of its battery. The S25 Ultra, however, drained 28%. To be fair, both phones gave flawless gameplay with absolutely zero stuttering, but the iPhone clearly demonstrated way better battery efficiency during really intense use.
And you know, that efficiency ties directly into this next metric, 34.6 degrees Celsius. That is the exact peak temperature the iPhone 17 Pro Max reached during that same hour-long gaming session.
So why does that matter? Well, we have to look at what these phones are actually made of. The iPhone peaked at a super manageable 34.6 degrees, while the S25 Ultra climbed up to 38.1. Here is the thermal physics behind it all. Apple actually transitioned the iPhone 17 Pro series away from titanium and went back to an aluminum unibody. Aluminum is a fantastic heat conductor, which means it pulls that internal processor heat out and dissipates it really effectively. Samsung is using titanium, and while titanium is insanely strong, it tends to trap heat a bit more, meaning you're definitely going to have a warmer device in your hands during a long gaming marathon.
Round 3. Cameras. Zoom versus selfies. Different lenses for different priorities.
Look, it's no secret that both of these phones take breathtaking pro-level photos. But what's super interesting is that they trade blows in completely different specialties. When you look at the data side by side, they clearly have different priorities. Samsung easily holds on to the undisputed telephoto zoom crown. If you are zooming in on a subject from far away, the pure hardware detail on the S25 Ultra is just unmatched. On the other hand, Apple easily grabs the win for the front-facing camera. The 17 Pro Max features this massively upgraded multi-aspect selfie cam, and perhaps more importantly, it boasts far superior native optimization when you're recording directly inside your favorite social media apps. But hey, let me just reassure the photography purists out there. Regardless of which ecosystem you prefer, both of these flagships shoot fantastic raw photos. Since Apple usually defaults to a slightly warmer look and Samsung leans a bit cooler, shooting in RAW gives you total, uncompressed control to tweak the warmth and color grading exactly to your own personal aesthetic in post-production.
Moving into round 4, the drop test. Aluminum versus titanium. The physics of survival.
Okay, we're stepping out of the software specs and into a brutal, real-world durability test. We're comparing Apple's softer aluminum shell right up against Samsung's highly rigid titanium frame. But before we look at the shattered glass, we need to understand the why here. It all comes down to material impact physics. Aluminum is a relatively soft metal, so when it hits concrete, it dents pretty easily. But by doing that, it actually absorbs a lot of the kinetic energy, acting a bit like the crumple zone on your car. Titanium, conversely, is incredibly rigid. It resists denting beautifully, but because it doesn't give or deform, it sends that kinetic shockwave straight inside the phone.
And we can see exactly how this translates into the real world. During a corner drop test, physics did exactly what it was supposed to do. The Galaxy S25 Ultra, with that titanium frame, basically shrugged off the impact. It stayed virtually flawless, with literally no visible damage. The iPhone's softer aluminum, though, took the hit. It showed visible scuffs and a noticeable dent right on the corner of impact. So that brilliantly shows off titanium's incredible external armor.
But check out what happens when they land flat on their backs. Both phones totally shattered their rear glass, which isn't a huge shock. However, the iPhone's aluminum frame absorbed enough of that impact energy that its delicate camera lenses remained perfectly safe. The S25 Ultra, not so lucky. It suffered significantly worse glass shattering, and more importantly, that shockwave from the rigid titanium actually damaged the autofocus unit of its telephoto camera. So the crucial point is that while titanium stops the outside from denting, it can actually be significantly harsher on the delicate internal components during a flat impact.
And finally, the dreaded 1.5-meter face-down drop. Look, glass is still glass, and both screens were completely shattered under the direct impact. But miraculously, the internal biometric security systems on both devices somehow survived. The Face ID array on the iPhone and the ultrasonic under-display fingerprint sensor on the Samsung both continued to function perfectly after the fall. Kind of amazing, right?
Round 5. The final verdict. Choosing your champion.
So what does this all mean for us? We've analyzed the nits, the thermal throttling, the lenses, and the metallurgical properties of their frames. It is time for a final verdict. And honestly, the truth is, neither phone is universally better. It 100% comes down to how you actually use your device every single day. Are you a hardcore mobile gamer who needs superior thermal management? Or someone who's constantly outside relying on social media and high screen visibility? If so, the iPhone 17 Pro Max is probably calling your name. But if you demand unparalleled zoom capabilities for photography, or you just want an incredibly rigid frame that refuses to dent, the Galaxy S25 Ultra is your champion. I want to leave you with this provocative final thought. Don't just look at the brand names. Look at your own daily habits and ask yourself, which of these specific hardware trade-offs actually fits your life? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I'll catch you next time.